Good evening. It's 6:27 on Sunday, the 21st of June, and you're listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast, the podcast where we explore political matters of international, national, and local importance, discussing them in a reasonable, calm, and decent way to get to the heart of the matter. I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury. Good evening, Ian.
Good evening, Simon, and what an evening it is. Once again, anyone fancy denying climate change? Anybody? Anybody?
Well,
No,
we'll
no.
start getting the folks talking about what it is summer. Yes, so good evening and welcome to the show, everyone. You'll notice we've opened with the date and time because, well, things are changing so bloody rapidly at the moment. By the time we've finished, half of this could be out of date. But nonetheless, after Andy Burnham's stonking result on Thursday, securing 55% of the vote, it's now Makerfield or Breakerfield time. News
Well,
organisations,
indeed.
do you see what I did there? Did you like that? I might
Yeah,
be stuck
yeah.
with that. News organisations are reporting today that PM Keir Starmer will tomorrow announce his resignation, and even, the oracle of all things, the British government that is Donald Trump has even gone to the airwaves to say that the PM is resigning tomorrow. If this proves true, when will he go? Will there be a bun fight of leadership hopefuls, or can Burnham secure a coronation? What does the Makerfield result tell us? What do the results that day say for Labour, Reform, Conservatives and others, not just in Makerfield, but the other two parliamentary by-elections that took place that day? And as ever, we're going to share our thoughts. So let us know what you think in comments. So,
Let's,
surprise,
shall we,
John?
shall we, shall
Yeah,
we
sorry, go on.
start with the result?
Yes, let's have a look at the result. Yes, let's go to
Because
go to that.
we didn't do a prediction show on this one.
No.
Um, but it's that interesting piece for me with this one,
Mm-hmm.
because often when you look at opinion polls, and those of us who are interested in politics generally do, what you tend to find, and it's a kind of truism over recent elections, is the right tends to do slightly better than the polls predict. And there is an element that has suggested that, prior to perhaps politics going right up in the air in the last couple of years, there was always a belief that your right-leaning voters were reluctant to tell pollsters which way they were going to vote. There was a slight shame in admitting to being right wing, because if we look historically, it was always sort of, the left wing people are the goodies and the right wing people are the baddies. So I actually thought this was going to be much closer
Mm-hmm.
than perhaps the polls predicted. And could I have been more wrong? No.
I mean, to be fair, you had lots of company. Matt Goodwin took to the internet to tell everyone how much he knows about Makerfield and how he knows what it was like on the ground in Gorton and Denton, and therefore he knows that Reform are going to win it and they're absolutely going to trounce all over Labour. But let's talk through the
Could I
results, just so that
could
we
I
kind of got over.
pause you
Yeah, sorry, go on. I'm
just for one
poised
second?
like a coiled zebra. Go for it.
I am not accepting any kind of equivalence between myself and Goodwin. Can I
No,
just make
well,
that
you just
clear
predicted the
to
same
anyone
thing,
listening?
but
Oh, no, he
his
said it
was.
would be much closer. I didn't stand there with a trumpet saying, well, "I tell you what, mate. I tell you what. I tell you." So let's look at the numbers. But we are. I am
Okay, all right.
no,
I'm not going to put you in the same
no,
box as Matt Goodwin.
no,
Um,
no.
just reminding everybody, please do make sure to give us a like, follow, subscribe, share your comments. We'd love to see what you think. So in case it was any shock to you, spoilers. But Labour won with nearly 55% of the vote, with 24,927 votes. Reform came second with 34.5% of the vote, 15,696. Restore, 3,011, 6.8. The Conservatives, 997 votes, 2.2%, so losing their deposit. The Greens, 308.07%, losing their deposit. The Lib Dems, 163.04%. I've not included all the other ones. There are about 12 different
Yeah.
candidates. So there were about 3 different independent candidates. There was a guy dressed as a fox. There was Count Binface. Count Binface were only about 70 votes behind the Lib Dems. So I don't know what to take from that.
I'm
um,
I'm I'm
but
I'm
not quite the
I'm
squeeze and the tight race that I think everybody was, or lots of people were certainly predicting.
Well, there was a school of thought, wasn't there, that said that restore might split the
Yeah.
harder right vote,
Hmm.
and that 7, and I think they were predicted to get about 7%. So I think they got pretty much what was expected. And there was a thought that if you added those two together, then that might split the vote and let Labour through. But let's be honest, pretty much when you get 55% of the vote, that's more than everybody else added together. Even my simple maths can cover that. So, a resounding vote for, and it's always that question, isn't it? Because this one was a two-horse race. I think
Mm.
the Conservatives, the Lib Dems, the Greens, even Count Binface. There's an element of, I think the people who put the X next to them were people who were going to just do that again, can of beans.
Hmm.
Um, Really, it was almost a referendum on Labour versus Reform.
Well,
And
yeah. I
I,
mean,
I guess before we get into what it means for Labour, because it does mean an awful
yeah,
lot for
yeah. Sure. Okay.
Labour,
Mm.
what do you think it means for Reform?
So I think so. So Richard Tice and Nigel Farage took to. I mean, Tice actually faced some interviews. Farage seems to be very distant from any microphone that he doesn't own. But he put out something on social media, basically saying that there will be lots of people that voted Reform that would have gone to Restore, and strangely asking them, well, what do you want? We're the true anti-establishment party. We're the true people that are the defender of normal people, which kind of seems a mate. Could you not see coming someone doing to you what you've been doing to Conservatives for the last 5 years? But then also claiming that, and to be fair, there may well be some of this, that there would have been some Reform voters that actually voted Labour in order to make sure they got rid of Starmer.
Yeah, there's a truism in that.
Well, no, I mean
Yeah,
the thing is, no one can prove or disprove it either way, because
no, no,
the only thing
and
on the ballot was who do you vote for? It's not, why isn't. So I just find it
it's
always interesting
never a
after
question.
elections.
Yeah,
Loads of pundits and loads of parties was, oh well, this is why people voted this way, or well, this is why people didn't vote for us. Um, Absolutely nothing to do with our candidate said things that the electorate really didn't like, or they basically didn't like the approach that your candidate
well,
took, or your
and
party policies. No. It's about the electorate tactically voting a different way to get a different outcome.
you do wonder, don't you, Simon?
Mm.
It's that's two very high-profile by-elections
Yeah.
where Reform have not got across the line.
No.
And I think the thing for me, which is the piece of, and often, you know, again at the risk of paraphrasing, oh, two-tier media system, oh, two-tier media system, oh, you scrutinise our candidates.
I'm not sure which
But in
tier
both,
we're on, but
but in both cases,
mm.
it hasn't taken very long to find the more questionable aspects or distasteful aspects of their social media history. And, you know, the ill-fated question time, the Reform candidate was scrutinised by being asked some questions, which he duly answered. Um, you'd think in two such high-profile by-elections, they'd be able to find a better person,
Well,
wouldn't you?
see. I don't know whether they. So aside from them never seemingly bothering to do any candidate assessment that involves someone picking up a tablet and googling their candidate and looking at their social media history, but aside from that, um, I think they saw what happened in Gorton and Denton,
Yep,
saw saw that Hannah Spencer landed really well as an authentic
yeah,
and honest candidate, a plumber. Um,
yeah. They've got,
and
they've got a plumber. We'd better have a
yeah,
plumber.
we better have a plumber. That's what we need to do to be the honest person on, meet your candidate in Screwfix or whatever. So I it seems like that was the logic they kind of went for. Obviously, he was recently elected as a councillor, so so he's literally weeks into being a councillor, and then jumped into being a parliamentary candidate. But it is quite interesting that because there were 3 parliamentary by-elections on Thursday last week.
Yes, there were.
And
Tell me about Aberdeen.
so Aberdeen, so Aberdeen South, the Conservatives gained that with 49.5% of the vote. The SNP their vote share went down to 28.6%. Reform on 8.6%. So they were nowhere to be kind of any use. Arbroath and Broughty Ferry is an SNP hold with 41.4% of the vote. Conservatives on 19.4%. And Reform on 18.2%. So a bit more in contention then, but still contention against second place, but still distant from the first place. I mean, we kind of touched on it when we talked in PMQs about the case that Kemi Badenoch is making about the net zero policies and about refusing to open up new oil and gas exploration in the North Sea, despite there being about 10% of it less, and there's still being drilling going on. Pumping of gas and oil coming out anyway from existing things. But that landed obviously quite well to the electorate in Aberdeen. Being the home of the oil industry. So I just found it interesting that of the last few parliamentary by-elections, Greens have won one, Labour have held one, the Conservatives have gained one, the SNP have held one. Is there going to be one that the Lib Dems are going to win?
And yeah, I guess it's some interesting things. For me, conservatism seems to have landed in Aberdeen, and they came second in Arbroath, and kind of both of I sort of we live in strange times, because it almost seems like Reform's ability to gain traction in Scotland doesn't seem to be the same as it is in England. So very more interesting stuff to come. But I guess Andy Burnham, big win.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever happens next?
Well, that's the $64 million question. So, as we said in the intro, there's lots of reports that the Prime Minister is going to be chucking the towel in on Monday. Is that going to be an immediate resignation, or is that going to be I'm going to be resigning on X? So essentially, kind of setting a timetable for his departure, rather than, because if he just leaves, that leaves David Lammy in charge.
Jesus.
No, David Lammy. That may or may not be the best way to demonstrate competence and stability in the form of government. Will there be more people jumping on the bandwagon once a contest is gone? So it seems like we've had a kind of a faux war in the last couple of weeks, because obviously Andy's been on manoeuvres trying to basically stand in a by-election. He was declined by the NEC in February to stand in Gorton and Denton. Was permitted by the NEC to stand in Makerfield, and obviously has won that very, very convincingly. Will that mean that he becomes the heir apparent, or, as we've had resignation week before last now from Wes Streeting?
Oh, Wes.
Wes. I should have clipped that up, shouldn't I? Yeah, so he resigned as Health Secretary, basically saying that he couldn't stay in the cabinet, and wanted to kind of throw his lot in with a contest. But it was only last week that he was confirming publicly that he did have the required number of members to support to launch a leadership contest. So now we've had the result in Makerfield. Andy doesn't get sworn into Parliament, so he doesn't take office as an MP until Monday when he's sworn in. So the critical thing is kind of what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen Monday. But will anybody else? Will Well, so Healy resigned as Defence Secretary because of strong disagreements about the defence
Mm.
review, as did Al Khan's. His
Well,
his
the whispers are that Al Khan's has got notions and aspirations.
okay. So quite often in these things, I mean, there's obviously more data to go in blue on blue action than there is on red action, but quite often in these things, the person that kind of launches it isn't the person that benefits in the end, because that kind of
But
causes a split, and then essentially people can at least coalesce around someone who didn't do it. But maybe that's also why. I mean, and Burnham hasn't been in a position to pull the metaphorical trigger, whereas Wes, until last week when he said that when he confirmed that he actually had he's not pulled the trigger yet because Burnham's not actually kind of taken his seat in Parliament yet, and he's previously said that he wanted to make sure that if there was a leadership contest that Burnham was in it. So if there's going to be a contest rather than the coronation, how much of a bun fight will that be? Will Starmer still stand in that contest? He said previously that he will, but it seems like
yeah,
the people whispering in his ear are probably saying it's not really going to work, mate. What do you think?
well, there is the famous scene from The Simpsons.
The Simpsons. Okay.
Mm.
Okay. I thought we were going to paraphrase John Major.
No,
Okay.
no, where the head of the power plant is served the three-eyed fish caused by the pollution.
Okay.
And as he spits the piece of fish out, all of his kind of campaign team just their heads sag and it's you're done. And he runs about saying, come on, let's brew some more coffee, let's get things going. And they just look at him and say, you're done. And for me, Sir K is done.
Not Special
I
K.
think not Special K. I think he's going to resign tomorrow. I think he'll set out a timetable
Mm-hmm.
rather than walking away. And the reason I think he'll do that is because, of course, as you've moved the deck chair containing Andy Burnham out of Manchester, there's now got to be a by-election for the City of Manchester mayoral thing.
Yes.
And I think that's another place where it'll be another two-horse race. And, or lots of people speak very highly of Andy Burnham and the legacy. I wonder whether some of his popularity in the north might fade if he walks away, reform, takes over Manchester and then starts stripping away a lot of the stuff that is very well received in the Greater Manchester area. So I think there'll be a bit of time to allow for the Manchester by-election to do its thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think there'll be a phony war.
Mm.
I don't understand the mechanics of Labour as well as I did um, the Conservative when originally, it was who's going to replace Boris,
Mm-hmm.
and that was all engineered. They tried to engineer it so that Rishi won first time round. The members said no, thank you, and so the second time it was engineered so that Rishi won because, well, nobody else was allowed to play. I think if you look at Andy Burnham, what does he represent? He represents a much more leftist agenda, which, let's be honest, is much more popular with the Labour membership than where Sir Keir has landed. They know, the MPs know that at the moment, you know, if there was a general election tomorrow, half of them are dead. So they've got to vote for change. And it's why there's no point Sir K running.
I don't think I think I think there was a point where it was worth him kind of seeing them off in kind of John Major style of it's time for the bastards to put up or shut up.
Yes.
But I think we've gone past that. I think his hold well below the waterline now, to the point
Well,
that his own cabinet, Ed Miliband and Sharma Mahmood have both told him. I mean, they've told him before that basically he needs to kind of set a date
yeah,
for when he's
and
going to go. We've had reports today of other cabinet members saying, well, reports publicly of named cabinet members saying privately that they've told the PM to go. And it's like,
yeah,
it's not really private if you've kind of told the press.
yeah, yeah.
I think that kind of ship has well and truly hit the iceberg. The thing for me though is there's two kind of questions. I think it's no longer a when. Sorry, it's no longer an if. It's now a when. Does he basically just walk away, or does he say, I'm going to allow a leadership to take place, but I will be stepping down end of August or whatever the hell date he wants?
I would think it'll be end of September.
See, I would have expected them to try and get something to have someone in place before the party conference, because otherwise
Yeah, yeah,
party conference is going to be
yeah,
a bit shit. So,
yeah.
so
Probably that's probably a good shout. Yeah,
well, unless you want to put the leadership contest content, if you're going to have a full-on leadership contest, you could argue that actually the best way to have them engage with their electorate, which is the party membership, is at party conference. So you could also the flip side
yeah,
of that would be that you could actually go for we'll actually open the ballot the week after conference or whatever, or the end of September, etc. So you could kind of do that. So it's that. So it's the how and when rather than the if now, and then it's will there be a contest or will there be a coronation? It looks like, unless lots of people are on manoeuvres, and for example, Wes Streeting is able suddenly to decide he can accept some sort of high position in a Burnham
it's a
cabinet, and no one
yeah,
else stands. It's a lot of
it's a
ifs.
phony contest, isn't it? Because there's an element of, if let's look at it.
Mm.
Wes is slightly to
Oh,
the right
Wes.
of Wes.
Sorry.
He's slightly to the right of Sir Keir, or about in the same place. Which, let's be honest, you know, the Parliamentary Labour Party doesn't want that. The membership definitely don't want that. So Wes is kind of he's yesterday's Labour Party. I think, for me, he's been a very, very competent health secretary.
Mm.
He's done really well. The people that work with him, you know, actually talk a lot about his leadership style, that he comes across very genuine. I think he's got a lot going for him. But I always think to myself, if I quite like the Labour candidate,
It's
then there's
probably
probably
an
every
indication
chance
they're not going to win.
yeah, it is a pretty
Yeah.
good indication
Yeah.
that if they're my sort of person, then they're not going to be the sort of person for the Labour membership or even the Parliamentary Labour Party. So I think Wes will stand.
Mm.
I think he'll probably kind of, I think his pitch will be perhaps more continuity than radical change. And then once you look beyond him and Andy, it's that, well, you know, has Burnham moved into the northerner space? Um, that was previously, that was Angela's gig. And I think, Angela Rayner's tax affairs. I I think I don't think she's in a particularly strong position. And then you start getting down to the Tom Tugendhats and the Mel Strides of the Labour Party, which is who? And obviously those
Well,
last two are Conservatives, but
yeah, I
you
don't
know,
think either.
when we
Yeah, they're
start
definitely.
talking,
Yeah. I get
yeah, when
what
we
you mean.
start talking about Al Khans or you know,
Yeah, I
um,
mean, to be fair, until last week, probably most people didn't know who Al Khan's was, but
yes,
it will certainly have landed lots of respect with the public and with the parliamentary party, surely from his kind of principled. Bless him.
oh
I mean,
yeah,
he was taking interviews he was doing the Sunday politics shows rounds, wasn't he? And he was taking interviews, and essentially they were saying, "But why are you still here? Why haven't you resigned yet? And you could almost see the cogs kind of working of, yeah, actually, I
Mm,
should probably resign. And within 2 hours, he had.
yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh, and I
he might be the one that comes from behind, you know, the so-called dark horse that surprises everybody. Um, but so far, touch wood, it doesn't seem like there's a red on red kind of fight. There's just I'm interested. I've got enough people. I'm ready to stand. Well, okay, but you're looking a bit silly now because it's been 2 weeks and you haven't pressed the button yet. There are reasons, and those make sense, but it does kind of look a bit okay. But then, if it
well,
is going to be
I
a coronation, it's
yep.
then the Labour men sitting in a back room doing a deal to sort out the leadership of the Labour Party and the leadership of the country, which kind of doesn't really sound all that progressive.
Well, I guess that it's that whole thing around, well, I never voted for him. Well, no, you don't get to vote for a prime minister. You get to vote for your candidate. I think the challenge that the Labour Party's got in this, Simon,
Mm,
is that, Burnham he's been a really popular metropolitan mayor.
hmm
They've, you know, he seems to have done really good things for Manchester, and there are other metropolitan mayors that have not done as much for Manchester, that's done for the regions they represent, as he appears to have done for Manchester. Um, it's interesting, when you go there now, that it's. And I was up there only a few weeks ago and chatting to a couple of friends, and they were saying that Manchester is kind of it's becoming more sort of London in the north, kind of, month by month, year by year, in that you've still got metropolitan boroughs of Manchester which are, you know, almost working class, non-working class, quite a lot of poverty and deprivation, and you've got some of the central parts of Manchester which are, vibrant and bloody expensive, and it has that kind of central London vibe about it. So, you know, and you can argue whether that's a good or a bad thing and about losing cultural identity. But whatever he's done, he seems to be pretty popular with it. And I think it would be fair to say that he is much more left leaning than Sir Kay and the current crowd.
I think there was one interview where he described himself as um, business friendly socialism. Now, you might consider that an oxymoron, um,
Mm.
but
Well, it's an appealing concept, isn't it?
I mean, he certainly seems to have landing that in, like you say, there's certainly growth in Manchester. There's certainly,
Hmm.
lots of homes being built. There's certainly lots of development. There's certainly life to it, and it's a thriving region. I think this, the question is, will that can that be transplanted nationally? Can that Manchester effect, whatever that actually turns out to be, can that kind of transcribe across the nation? I think the thing for me was, there was a bit of me that was kind of hoping that the one thing we can be certain of is that I thought if there was going to be a change of leadership, and then of course there's going to be a change of Chancellor of Exchequer, and we can perhaps get to that in a second, that maybe someone might pull the plug on LGR because it's so bloody expensive and not going to save any sodding money, and so
Hmm.
chaotic. But Burnham's obviously not going to do that, is he?
I don't know that he won't.
Well, his whole shtick is
Uh,
that he's been a metropolitan mayor of a devolved area. Surely he can't then get into
yes.
number 10 and pull the rug of the same powers out from other regions. Maybe he'll go ahead with devolution, but might find a way to get LGR to not be the clusterfuck that it is at the moment. Sorry, to other technical terms are available.
Well,
Maybe.
and I think that's the challenge, because there's an element of, it. I think he's actually going to have to walk a tightrope, isn't he?
Mm,
Because shall we just close the bit off what happens next in terms
yes.
of our speculation? I think we're both on the same page of whatever happens next, whether it's a real leadership contest, he fires the starting gun tomorrow, whether it's a phony war, whatever it is, I think we are both in the high 90% certain that Burnham's going to win it.
Yeah, short of some sort of surprise, I can't see how anyone else is going to do it. The interesting thing for me, though, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of us here, is that in order to show some leadership, he needs to demonstrate some different policies to the ones that have been provided already.
Well,
and how much can you depart from the manifesto in 2024 before opposition parties? I mean, they're likely to start calling from it from the moment that whoever wins gets appointed, starts calling for a general election, because there isn't a mandate for different policies.
and that is exactly where I think his challenge lies.
How do you change it, but not change it enough that there's a legitimate call for an election?
Well, when it comes to fiscal stringence, which, let's be honest, you and I are on very different pages. Well, it could well be. There's an element of you in your mad, starry-eyed socialist way just wants to throw money about all over the place. And I am sad not to have seen austerity 2.0 or 3.0, whichever one in the series we're on now. And I think there is that element of, when we look at the fiscal rules that Rachel from Accounts and Labour baked into the manifesto, no tax rises. We've both agreed, and I agree it with a smile on my face, and you agree it while banging your head on the desk and weeping, that they have painted themselves into a corner with those rules.
Yeah, they've painted themselves into corners, and they've made a multitude of unforced errors that politically and financially that are just like, why the fuck did you do that? Yes,
and I guess if that's the cornerstone, that's the very bedrock of your economic policy, and you've spent the first 2 years fighting like mad to stick to that, can the King of the North just come in and throw the whole economic policy in the bin and start with a completely new framework of government that, to use the oft quoted term on the internet, well, that's not what we voted for.
Have I heard that before? Yeah, but that. I mean, this is where we start getting into the constitutional conundrum. We don't elect prime ministers
governments
in this
can
country.
do,
we elect a government, and any government can change its policies even without. I mean, so the manifesto isn't a contract,
not a contract.
Is it?
No.
Despite Reform calling theirs one in the last election. But the electorate will punish governments for not following or keeping to their manifesto, or at least to the theory of their manifesto. I don't think anybody expects every single thing to be exactly the same way, because events happen, dear boy, events.
Well, exactly, but I'm not convinced by that, because I think, in broad terms, apart from the odd mad bit, Labour have pretty much stuck to their manifesto. But their manifesto was, to use that term, was rather thin gruel in terms of, what you'd be getting. You voted for change, but there wasn't a lot of change in the manifesto. You're getting what the manifesto delivered, which isn't much change, and you're absolutely furious about it. So I'm not convinced that and there's a bit of me, Simon, that thinks that Andy Burnham, from everything I read about him and from people who've dealt with him, he's not a man that lacks self-confidence. And I am not convinced that he won't ride in, King of the North, going to be crowned by. I'm not convinced that he won't tear the manifesto up. But a really easy bit that wasn't in the manifesto to press pause on, or to kick into the long grass, back to your original point, is LGR and
Mm.
devolution, because it was never in the manifesto. It sort of emerged half. It was not oven ready. It wasn't even half baked.
Well, I think there was stuff about devolving powers out of Westminster, but it was nothing. There was nothing
Yeah, it was.
specific, and it didn't mention LGR.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
that kind of. It was one of those noble things,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
when somebody writes on their to-do list, must lose weight. It's that. Well, yeah, yeah, I get that, but in what way? So that would be an easy one, I think, for him to press pause on, and I
Hmm.
don't think there'd be any grand announcement. I think it would just gently be the time is not right, um,
So
because
do you? But
ultimately,
oh, sorry to interrupt, but it's
yeah,
important to separate devolution and LGR here. Are you talking about devolution? Because devolution is obviously the key to what he's been able to deliver in Manchester, whereas LGR is the
and
local
and
government. For listeners,
and
it's
you
the
you
it's the
yeah,
reorganisation of the second tier councils um, below that currently either are second tier councils underneath county councils, or
yeah,
indeed councils that are unitary authorities like Portsmouth and Southampton. So
and
could getting rid of that take a massive kind of thing away, but still give the powers to a regional mayor?
I think the devolution piece, I
Mm,
think, yeah, yes, I think that could be his middle ground,
mm,
that says, look, I'm doing the same for you in Hampshire and Solent as I got to do in Manchester. And there's also quite a strong argument, isn't there, that I managed to do all this in Manchester without local government reorganisation, and we made it work. So whilst it would be better for us to simplify everything, the challenges of making those changes would hurt the people at the time. Blah, 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 blah. I'm
yeah.
not writing a speech for him, but that would be an easy escape route for him, I
Mm.
think.
Yeah, I think you
Because
could deliver the decisions and the money being made closer to the people that they actually affect. I think you can deliver that without juggling around all of the stuff with LGR. There's bound to be someone screaming at the screen. By all means, pop something into the comments. So
yeah,
that might be kind of a win. But I think he's skewered either way, because he can't carry on the same, because what's the point in changing leader? Even if he does change his approach, he's still going to face the same problems. There isn't exactly a great big cupboard of money stacked to the side that they've just forgotten
yeah,
about.
yeah,
And
but
yeah, go on.
let me just hit pause on you for a second there, because there doesn't have to be,
Yeah.
because there is nothing that forces a government to be fiscally responsible. The government can be,
Mhm.
you can call it investment, or you can call it reckless spending. You can call it whatever you like, but there's nothing that ever forces any government to live within its means. So there is that element of, you know, the only thing that has stopped Rachel Reeves slamming an extra 15p on the top rate of income tax is her own rules. The only thing that's stopping Rachel Reeves hammering in a wealth tax is her own rules. All of those things, if you want to tax more and spend more, all of those things are within the gift of the Labour Party, because I think if you took that before Parliament with the size of the majority of they got, they'd walk it through. There is nothing to stop, Andy Burnham, you know, apart from the bond markets, if he chooses to go wild with you know, public sector pay increases of 10% for all our hard-working policemen, nurses, doctors, yada yada yada. There's nothing to stop him doing that, and there's an element of it plays to the politics of popularity, where if if he was to go full old school Labour, tear up the manifesto and spend baby spend, he'd be a lot more popular. And
Well,
I think it's the way that Labour might retain control of government.
I don't know that. I don't know that there's a need for him to go to kind of those extremes, and that will definitely frighten the bond markets. That will have the same effect that the Liz Truss government did,
But
of loads of
Lizzie's lively man. Yeah.
loads of tax cuts without finding actually the saving. This is the opposite. Loads of spending commitments without actually finding the money. Unless there is a way that, I mean, there are ways that they could tax further, but I think we discussed previously about the problem is, at the moment, you can talk about growth as your number one priority, but if you keep enacting policies that actually harm growth, you keep putting money on national insurance, you keep making it harder to employ people, and you don't do anything about the tax bans that have been frozen for what, 5 years now, 6 years.
Yep. Yep.
Which is probably, that and VAT are probably the things that people would see most easily. The other things other stuff you could get into about energy bills. So I'm not going to write his financial policy for him, but there are things to do. But you also don't want to scare the horses and bugger the bond market over. So talking of that, who do we reckon? Assuming it's going to be Burnham,
Yes.
what do we reckon about Chancellor? Are we both certain
Right.
that Rachel
Rachel's
Reeves isn't
gone.
going to stay on?
Not a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Not a chance for Rachel. I mean, she's never been popular with anybody. So there is an element of, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because whoever the chancellors are very rarely glamorous, are they?
No, they're not. But they're one of those weird things that when they're it's like one of those things that when they're working well, you don't notice them, and you don't want to notice them. But when they're not working well, you bloody notice them.
Yeah, I mean,
It's those things, and
yeah,
I don't, for me, I don't think she's been brave and bold enough. I think there's been a lot of incremental stuff, and there's been a lot of shooting yourself in the foot with unforced errors. They're talking about getting, refusing to do anything on the 2-child benefit cap until essentially they were forced to, having previously suspended people for voting against the party whip, and the stuff about winter fuel, and stuff like that. When I know we got into kind of a discussion about it last week, about there are some things that you could do that would immediately kind of help actually with the cost of energy bills that wouldn't be kind of the just crazy kind of things that they're doing. It just, and there's not that, I'm not to say that there aren't some good things that they've actually done, because waiting lists are down. Education is improving. The economy isn't doing awfully, but unemployment, I think actually the last week's announcement was that actually unemployment was down slightly.
I mean, it had gone up every month for 22
but
months in a row. So I wouldn't declare
one week of it going down isn't necessarily a trend, right?
No, no.
Net immigration has basically plummeted. So there are shoots of things actually going well.
Yeah.
But I don't think any of that's landing with anybody, because in their day-to-day, in their monthly pay packet, they're not feeling that, because when they're going for their food shop, they're still feeling that that's taking up an exorbitant amount of their salary. When they're going to fill up their car, they're finding that that's taking up a huge amount of their salary. Likewise with their energy bills, or their rent, or their mortgage. There are all of these things, some of which the government has the opportunity to do something about, but it has to be brave about where it finds the money from, or finds the saving in order to be able to afford it. That's the $64 million question. If I had the answer to that, I'd be going for the bloody job myself.
Well, and I think the thing there that you
couldn't, because I'm
kind
not clever
of
enough.
Yeah, but I think the thing is, you are tapping into that issue, the issue that is at the very heart of the matter, because there is that element of, when you start to reorder the spending priorities, where is the biggest fire that needs more money now? And I think when Labour came to power, they chose the NHS, and they've done, they gave the the whatever they're called now, the resident doctors, a
Hmm.
whopping pay rise to end the industrial action, and waiting lists have come down, and they have poured a lot of more money into the NHS. And as I say, credit to Wes Streeting, you've seen the impact of that money, which you often don't see in the NHS. So
Yeah.
respect due. Defence seems to have risen from yeah, we'd probably better get round to that, to right up the top of the table. And the difficulty you've got with all of that is that it's not it's massive chunks of money, and without spending more on defence, the government is still effectively running a deficit budget. Every year, every time Rachel gets up to speak, it's and there'll be a deficit this year and next year and the year after, and then it will come into balance, and then year 5 there'll be a surplus of 27p. And then a year later, she stands up and says, year 1, there'll be a deficit, 2, 3, 4, and in 5, there'll be a surplus of 27p. And you're like, hang on, wasn't there meant to be a surplus of 27p? What it'd be now year 4? So there is this piece where, you know, more spending, can only ever mean 3 things: borrow more, tax more, spend less elsewhere. Those are your only 3 options.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the
And,
age-old adage, isn't it?
yeah,
Um,
and I think from Burnham's perspective, um, the where are you spending a lawful lot of your money is a challenge that the answer to that problem is really painful and goes against so many of Labour's core values that nobody will want to go there.
well, I think there's an argument to make of you can reduce welfare spending. Of course,
Mhm.
I'll call out that a massive chunk, if not half the welfare spending is pensions.
Yep.
Um, but nonetheless, the welfare spend on people that are of working age. In order to reduce that, to me, you look at it from the other way. You would cut the amount you spend on that by making it easier for employers to employ people that are currently not employed for
Yeah.
whatever reason.
And there is that piece, though, isn't there? It's that when you start to look at it, and I know this is a bit
Mm,
tangential,
we've gone off a little bit, but
but it is. But for
yeah,
me,
yeah.
it is a real world experience that happened yesterday. Coming
Okay.
home in London, while our nominated person went in to M&S, bought 4 sandwiches, 2 bags of crisps, 12 tins of beer, and 2 bottles of Diet Coke,
Hmm.
and staggered out of M&S, going, "I think I've been done." 70 quid. And it wasn't llama sandwiches, or it
Yeah, I
was
mean, you
chicken
did
and
go
stuff.
into M&S,
And
but I get your point.
but and I get but you see the point is that, if you are, and again, I'll paint that sort of picture. You are a working person, and you want to have a couple of pints on the way home from work and pick yourself up a fish and chippy tea on the way back to your house. That's well over 20 quid.
Yeah, yeah, that used to be something that was under a tenner, wasn't it? It was
Yeah, yeah.
that's kind of how it feels, and yeah, that's just kind of how
You know,
those things kind of hurt, and then we wonder why
and
hospitality is dying on its knees. It's finding it hard to recruit people, hard to retain people, and then actually it's finding it hard to keep
well,
customers because everything is so bloody expensive.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
and similar story. The chap who used to be on Portsmouth Politics. He was a waiter working down in Gunwharf, and
Mm,
he said, you know, when he was on a much lower wage, then they had more staff, which meant that in the restaurant that he worked in, they gave better service,
mm,
and they got more tips. And actually, he earned more in tips than his wage. And I'm not saying, we go to the American model where the gratuities effectively pay the staff and
yeah,
they
yeah,
don't get paid anything. But what he said is, people were saying to him, you've had a 30%, you've had a 30% rise in your wage. And his answer was yes, but that means that there are now less staff because the restaurant can't afford to employ
Yeah.
as many people. The bill has gone through the sky. So, people aren't leaving, and that with no cash being about, tables aren't leaving me 10, 15, 20 quid as a tip. So when I add my increased wages to the fact that I can't give the service that I used to, which means my tips fall, I'm much worse off. And
I'm
that's
just
where
trying.
that balancing act comes.
Yeah, no, sorry. I'm just trying to think. Are tips taxable?
They should be. Yes, they are.
Hmm.
And if you're self-employed, yeah, again, friend of mine who was a taxi driver,
Hmm.
the first time they did their accounts, they didn't put anything in for gratuities,
Yeah.
and when they had their tax assessed for the first time, the tax assessor looked at it and said, "Well, you've put nothing in for gratuities. You must be lying. Therefore, I'm going to assume you've got 10% of your total take as gratuities and tax you on that." So they never put zero in gratuities again.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff to get into the weeds of. Maybe we can get a
Yeah,
tax accountant on to kind of talk us through,
yeah,
or even
I,
business
I,
owners that would want to
yeah.
talk about kind of what they're facing, and how they're struggling with that. Talking about kind of future shows. So
Yes.
we'd like to do a couple of future shows. One is talking about what the pros and cons are of the ban for social media for under 16s. Will it actually bloody work? And is it kind of the right thing to do? If you're interested, if you'd want to come on the show, if you'd
Yep.
like to argue for or against that, give us a shout. Either send us a message on Facebook or send us an email, studio@pppodcast.uk. Or you can send us leave us a voice note from our website. We'd love to hear from you. Next week's also the 10th anniversary of the
Mm.
vote to leave the EU. So if you've got some views on that one that you'd like to share, perhaps you voted Remain and you've decided that actually the things that happened since have really put you off of the whole thing, and you wish that you hadn't, and actually you've got something to say about how things are going. Perhaps you voted Leave and you're frustrated with how it's gone, and and it hasn't gone how you expected it to, and maybe you've changed your mind, maybe you haven't, maybe you're more determined that actually it was the right thing to do. But either way, let us know what you think. We'd love to look at the prospects of doing some shows on those. So yeah, I'm just kind of conscious it's
It's
7:20. Have we
it is
got anything more to
7:20.
kind of round up on
I
on
don't
that one,
I
or
I don't think we have. I think, yeah, Burnham will be king. I don't think I ever answered your
about the
Chancellor
Chancellor?
question. Ed Miliband is where I think it's going to go. Um,
Okay.
Controversial choice. That's where I think could be Wes. Could be Wes.
Where's
Yeah,
it could
but whether
it could be that might be the kind of the long game that he's on with
yeah.
his maneuvers. But it will be interesting to see what I found interesting listening to some interviews that Wes Streeting did over the last couple of weeks was him talking. By the way, you're lint so far forward that I'm pretty much got just the top of your eyebrows.
I prom
Thank you, mate.
I promised I wouldn't do that.
No, that's all right. I can't really prod you. So yeah, so he made some interesting kind of points about look, it's policy first. It's about policy, not the person, and he would be willing to serve in anyone with anyone, but it's about the policy rather than who they are. So it's very very kind of interesting. But the other things I noticed about what the sorts of things Burnham had been saying, you'd seen how cooperative and interaction, how much positive interaction there was between him and some of the other regional mayors, some of whom are not Labour, and he's actually kind of built strong relationships with those. So it seems like he's not averse to decisions or cross-party policy that works, rather than, so that might be kind of an interesting thing. Might put the cat amongst the pigeons.
Dare I hope?
Because there's lots of serious things that really need really need kind of cross-party agreement about. There's obviously long-term things to talk about the NHS. There's long-term things to talk about funding the defence, how we're going to do that, and what the sensible ways are to try and get people that that are relying on the welfare, but can be helped back into work and supported correctly, but helped back into work. How those things could be made to work without it being a massive leaflet writing exercise. So, who knows?
Absolutely. So I will, based on that statement, I will now sit here and dare to dream that Andy Burnham's Chancellor is going to be the greatest Chancellor of them all, George Osborne. But until
That's
then,
definitely
you've
not.
been listening to the Pompey Politics podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And I've been Simon Sainsbury. Do join us. We'll be doing PMQs. I should have double checked. I'm sure there is PMQs. Assuming there is PMQs on Wednesday, who knows?
Might not be at PM.
Yeah. Don't forget to give us a like, follow, subscribe, comment. If you're listening to us just audio on the podcast, please give us a review, give us a comment. But yeah, see you next time. We'll be back on Wednesday. And then following that, we'll have a show. Next weekend, which we'll announce shortly. So see you then. But thanks very much. Good night.
Don't forget to like, follow, and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn.